My husband Ryan thinks he can get away with draining our life savings to invest in his business, while I'm struggling to make ends meet on my military pension. What he doesn't know is that while he's been transferring thousands to his assistant, Jennifer, I've been quietly meeting with bank investigators. And tomorrow morning, he'll discover that the veteran benefits account he's been pillaging isn't just in my name. It's federally protected, and every unauthorized withdrawal has been flagged for prosecution. The first sign that something was wrong came gradually, like storm clouds gathering on a distant horizon. Ryan and I had been married for 12 years, building what I thought was a secure future after my 3 tours in Afghanistan left me with both a medal for valor and a permanent limp. Before I jump into the details, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I'm sharing something that might save your financial future. We'd weathered my difficult transition to civilian life, started a small but growing property management company together, and finally purchased our dream home on the outskirts of Portland. Through it all, Ryan had been my rock, my constant, the one person I could rely on when the nightmares came or when the VA paperwork became overwhelming. He'd seen me at my lowest after the IED explosion that killed 2 members of my unit and left me with 16 surgeries over 4 years. He'd held my hand through physical therapy, championed my cause with reluctant doctors, and celebrated every small victory on my long road to recovery. When I finally received my full disability determination and back benefits, we'd agreed to put the substantial sum, nearly $175,000, into a special account that would serve as our safety net. "This is your money, Emma," Ryan had insisted back then, his blue eyes serious as they met mine across our kitchen table. "You earned it with your blood. We'll use it for emergencies only, or maybe someday for a cabin up at Lake Oswego like we've talked about." I had loved him even more in that moment, appreciative of his recognition of my sacrifice. The money represented not just financial security, but acknowledgement of what I'd given for my country. We compromised by putting it in a joint account, but with special withdrawal protections that required both our signatures for major transactions. At least, that's what I thought we'd arranged. Our property management business had been Ryan's idea initially, something we could build together that wouldn't put too much physical strain on me while utilizing the leadership and organizational skills I'd developed in the military. I handled the books and client communications while Ryan managed property maintenance and staff. For 5 years, we'd grown steadily, accumulating a portfolio of 32 rental properties that provided a comfortable income supplementing my military pension. "We need to expand," Ryan had announced 6 months ago over dinner. "There's an opportunity to acquire a dozen units in the historic district. It would nearly double our business." His enthusiasm was contagious, his face animated in a way I hadn't seen in months. "The timing's tight, though. The current owner is motivated to sell quickly." I'd expressed concern about moving too fast, about taking on additional debt when interest rates were rising. "Let's review the financials first," I'd suggested. "Make sure the numbers work before we commit." Ryan had seemed disappointed by my caution, but he'd nodded. "Of course. I've already asked Jennifer to prepare a complete analysis. She thinks it's a goldmine opportunity, but you're right. We should be thorough." Jennifer Chen had joined our company as Ryan's administrative assistant 8 months earlier. Young, ambitious, with a business degree from Oregon State and an impressive resume, she'd quickly made herself essential. She worked long hours, anticipated problems before they arose, and showed genuine interest in the growth of our business. I'd been grateful for her competence, especially as managing my chronic pain had become increasingly challenging, sometimes leaving me bedridden for days. "Jennifer's been amazing," Ryan would say, and I'd agreed. She'd relieved some of the burden I carried trying to balance my health issues with our business responsibilities. If she sometimes texted Ryan after hours with urgent questions, or if their meetings occasionally ran late, I'd thought nothing of it. I'd been grateful for her dedication. The historic district proposal had seemed solid on paper. The projected returns looked impressive, and the properties were in excellent condition. Yet something had felt off about the urgency, about the pressure to move quickly. Against my better judgment, I'd agreed to use a portion of our business line of credit for the down payment, with the understanding that we'd secure proper financing once the acquisition was complete. That was when the weather began to change. In our marriage, subtle shifts in the atmosphere that I initially attributed to stress. Ryan started working later, returning home with his shoulders tense, checking his phone more frequently. When I asked about the historic district properties, his answers became vague, deflective. "It's complicated," he'd say. "Jennifer's handling the paperwork. Don't worry about it." But I did worry. 15 years in the military had honed my instincts for trouble. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't identify exactly what. Our business account seemed to be hemorrhaging cash faster than our normal operations would justify. When I asked Ryan about specific transactions, he'd become defensive. "Do you think I'm embezzling or something?" he'd snapped after one such question. "I'm trying to grow our business while you're stuck in the same cautious mindset that keeps small companies small." His words had stung, partly because they contained a grain of truth. My military experience had made me methodical, risk-averse, but those same qualities had also protected us during economic downturns that had crushed similar businesses. "I just want to understand where the money is going," I'd responded calmly, fighting to keep my voice even. "That's my job in this partnership. Remember?" He'd softened then, coming around the kitchen island to wrap his arms around me. "You're right. I'm sorry. I've been stressed about making this expansion work. I'll have Jennifer prepare a complete financial breakdown for you tomorrow." The breakdown never came. Instead, the next day brought a different kind of revelation. I'd gone to make a deposit at our bank, a rare occurrence since I'd started using mobile banking, but a client had paid with a cashier's check that needed special handling. The teller, Madison, had been helping us for years, watching our business grow from its inception. "Emma, it's good to see you," she'd said, a slight hesitation in her voice as she processed my deposit. "While you're here, there's something you might want to discuss with our manager." My stomach had tightened, that familiar pre-mission tension spreading through my chest. "Is there a problem?" Madison had glanced around before lowering her voice. "I'm probably overstepping, but there have been some substantial withdrawals from your veteran benefits account over the past few months. Regular transfers to an external account." The room had seemed to tilt slightly. "That's not possible. That account requires dual authorization for withdrawals over $500. Madison's expression had confirmed my growing dread. The withdrawals were authorized through online banking. The dual authorization requirement was removed 4 months ago. By who? I'd asked, already knowing the answer. Mr. Barrett authorized the change. He had all the necessary documentation. Your power of attorney. The power of attorney I'd signed during my last major surgery, when infection had nearly cost me my leg and the doctors weren't certain of the outcome. I'd wanted Ryan to have the authority to make decisions if I couldn't. I'd never revoked it, never imagined I would need to. How much? My voice had sounded distant to my own ears. Madison had hesitated again. "You should really speak with—" "How much, Madison?" $127,000 over the past 4 months. The most recent transfer was yesterday, $15,000. The amount had hit me like physical blow. Nearly 3/4 of my veteran benefits, the money that represented my sacrifice, my security, my blood. Gone. Transferred without my knowledge. "I need to see the records," I'd said, military training taking over as shock threatened to overwhelm me. "Every transaction, every authorization, everything." The bank manager, Mr. Winters, had taken me into his office, his expression grave as he pulled up the account history. "Mrs. Barrett, there's something else you should know. The account these funds were transferred to, it's in 2 names, Your husband's and another individual's. Jennifer Chen, I'd said, the pieces clicking into terrible place. His surprise had confirmed my suspicion. Yes. How did you— What can I do? I'd interrupted, not wanting to waste time explaining. How do I stop this from continuing? Given the nature of these funds, veteran benefits protected under federal law, and the circumstances, there are several immediate actions we can take, Mr. Winters had explained. These transactions potentially constitute fraud, especially with the unauthorized removal of account protections. By the time I'd left the bank 2 hours later, I had set in motion a financial investigation that would freeze all questionable transactions, flag the accounts for potential fraud, and begin the process of recovering the transferred funds. I had also learned that veteran benefits have special federal protections Ryan had circumvented using my power of attorney. As I had driven home, my mind had raced with questions. Was our business expansion real, or merely a cover for something else? How long had Ryan been planning this deception? Was Jennifer more than just an assistant to him? The historic district properties, had we actually purchased them? Or was that entire narrative fabricated? I'd pulled into our driveway, noticing Ryan's car was missing despite it being nearly 7 p.m. Acting on instinct, I'd called our business line, getting the evening answering service. Has Mr. Barrett left for the day? I'd asked casually. Yes. Mrs. Barrett, he and Miss Chen left around 5:30 for their site visit in the historic district. Site visit? The pieces had continued falling into place, forming a picture I could barely stand to look at. Instead of confronting Ryan immediately, I'd made a decision that my military training had taught me. Gather intelligence before engaging the enemy. I'd opened my laptop and begun a systematic investigation of our financial records, both personal and business. What I discovered over the next 3 hours left me feeling as though I'd been dropped into enemy territory without backup or extraction plan. Our business expansion wasn't entirely fictional. Ryan had indeed placed deposits on several properties in the historic district, but the financial structure was nothing like what he'd described to me. The down payments hadn't come from our business line of credit, but directly from my veteran benefits account. And the ownership documents listed not Barrett Property Management as the purchasing entity, but a newly formed LLC, RJ Investments, with Ryan Barrett and Jennifer Chen as equal partners. Every thread I pulled unraveled more of what I'd believed was the fabric of our lives together. Bank statements revealed regular transfers to accounts I'd never seen before. Credit card statements showed charges at restaurants I'd never visited, jewelry stores where I'd received no gifts, and most damning, a weekend getaway to the Oregon coast while I'd been at a VA medical appointment in Seattle. If you're new to my channel, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. The support from this community has been incredible through this journey, and tomorrow's video will show exactly how I protected myself legally when everything fell apart. By midnight, I had compiled a devastatingly complete picture of my husband's betrayal. It wasn't just financial infidelity, though the systematic looting of my veteran benefits was breathtaking in its callousness. It was the calculated deception built over months, perhaps longer. The careful construction of a parallel life funded by my sacrifice. The apparent plan to establish a separate business with Jennifer while maintaining the facade of our marriage and partnership. What struck me most was the cold efficiency of it all. This wasn't a crime of passion or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was strategic, methodical. Qualities I'd once admired in Ryan now turned against me. I sat at our dining room table, surrounded by printed statements and highlighted documents, feeling the same icy clarity that had saved my life in combat situations. When emotion threatens to overwhelm, training takes over. Assess, plan, execute. I considered confronting Ryan immediately, unleashing the full force of my discovery and rage when he returned home, but tactical thinking prevailed. A premature confrontation would only give him time to cover tracks, hide assets, construct explanations. Better to let him believe his deception remained undiscovered while I positioned myself for maximum advantage. Instead of an emotional confrontation, I made a series of precise decisions. First, I called the law firm that had helped establish our business, requesting an emergency consultation with their partner specializing in both business law and veteran affairs. Then, I contacted my former squad leader, now a private investigator, in Portland, asking for immediate surveillance assistance. Finally, I called my closest friend from the service, Maya, who had left the military for a career in forensic accounting. "I need your expertise," I told her, my voice steady despite the circumstances. "And I might need a place to stay." "Tell me what happened," Maya had responded without hesitation. The immediate rally-to-support response that only those who've served together truly understand. I outlined the situation in military precision, the facts, the timeline, the evidence compiled. "That son of a bitch," she breathed when I finished. "Using your power of attorney to steal your benefits while you were recovering from combat injuries? There's a special place in hell for that kind of betrayal." "I don't need hell," I'd responded. "I need accountability and recovery of assets. Can you help?" "I'll be there at Zorro 700 tomorrow. Don't confront him yet. Document everything, secure all evidence, and don't let him know you're on to him." After we hung up, I methodically copied every relevant financial document, stored backups in cloud accounts Ryan couldn't access, and prepared a comprehensive timeline of the fraud. The military had taught me thorough documentation could be the difference between victory and defeat. This was no different, a battle with significant stakes, requiring strategy and precision. Ryan returned home just after 1 a.m. I had cleared away the evidence of my investigation and was sitting on the couch with a book, pretending to have waited up for him. "You're still awake," he said, surprise evident in his voice as he set down his keys. His collar was askew, a faint trace of unfamiliar perfume detectable even from where I sat. "Couldn't sleep," I responded, watching him carefully. "How was the site visit?" A flicker of something, guilt, concern, crossed his features before his expression smoothed into casual normalcy. "Productive. The historic district properties have even more potential than we initially thought. Jennifer found some tax incentives we might qualify for as well." The ease with which he delivered these lies was perhaps more disturbing than the deception itself. How many times had I believed similar explanations? How long had I been watching a performance rather than seeing my actual husband? "That's great," I said, matching his casual tone while noting every detail of his behavior. "You must be exhausted. Coming to bed?" "I need a shower first," he said, already moving toward the bathroom, creating distance between us. I listened to the water run, contemplating the stranger who had shared my home for 12 years. The man I had trusted with everything, my health, my finances, my future, my heart. The man who had systematically betrayed that trust while I was still recovering from injuries sustained serving our country. When Ryan finally came to bed, I pretended to be asleep, unable to bear the thought of his touch now that I knew where he had been, what he had done. He fell asleep quickly, apparently unburdened by conscience, while I lay awake cataloging the ways I would dismantle the life he had tried to build on the foundation of my stolen benefits. Morning arrived with Maya's precise 7 a.m. text. "Outside. When you're ready." Ryan had already left for the office, earlier than usual, claiming a breakfast meeting with potential investors. Another lie to add to the growing collection. Maya's expression when I opened the door told me she had spent the night analyzing the documents I'd sent. Her normally warm brown eyes were cold with professional assessment. "It's worse than you initially described," she said, setting her laptop on the dining room table. "The money trail shows regular transfers going back nearly 10 months, not just 4. Small amounts at first, probably testing whether you'd notice before escalating to the larger sums." She pulled up a detailed spreadsheet tracking every withdrawal. transfer, and subsequent movement of funds. He's been using your benefits to fund not just the historic district properties, but several other investments all held by this RJ Investments LLC. The company was registered 8 months ago, right? Around when Jennifer Chen started working for your property management business. The timeline alignment confirmed what I had already suspected. Jennifer's hiring had been the beginning of this scheme, not a coincidence. What about recovery? I asked, focusing on practical next steps rather than the painful confirmation of betrayal's extent. That's where I have relatively good news, Maya said, opening another document. Veteran benefits have special federal protections. Even with a power of attorney, Ryan had no legal right to redirect these funds to private investments without explicit consent specifically for that purpose. The bank's fraud department has already flagged this as potential financial exploitation of a disabled veteran, a federal offense with serious consequences. The phrase disabled veteran still caused a twinge of discomfort despite its technical accuracy. I had never seen myself as disabled, merely adapted to new physical realities. But in this situation, that legal classification provided powerful protections. The bank has initiated recovery procedures, Maya continued. All recent transfers have been frozen pending investigation, and they're preparing documentation for law enforcement. Because these are federally protected benefits, this isn't just civil fraud. It potentially carries criminal penalties. The reality of what this meant settled over me. My investigation wasn't just about recovering stolen funds. It was potentially setting in motion criminal proceedings against my husband. Despite everything, that possibility created a momentary hesitation. This was Ryan, the man who had held me through nightmare-plagued nights, who had learned to recognize the signs of an impending panic attack before even I could identify them, who had promised to stand by me for better or worse 12 years ago. Maya recognized my conflicted expression immediately. Emma, this isn't just about the money. This is about predatory exploitation of a combat-injured veteran. What he did wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. It was calculated theft from someone he had a duty to protect. Her words cut through my hesitation with military precision. She was right. Ryan's actions weren't a momentary lapse, but a strategic campaign executed over months. He had weaponized my trust against me, used my power of attorney, granted during a medical crisis, to systematically drain the financial security my service had earned. The attorney will be here at 10, I said, refocusing on the tactical approach. What documentation should we prioritize for that meeting? For the next 2 hours, Maya and I organized evidence, refined timelines, and prepared questions for the legal consultation. We were interrupted by a call from Mr. Winters at the bank. Mrs. Barrett, I wanted to update you personally, he said when I answered. We've completed our preliminary investigation and have frozen all accounts associated with the unauthorized transfers. We've also filed the required reports with the appropriate federal agencies regarding misuse of protected veteran benefits. What happens next? I asked. The next step would typically be notification to the secondary account holders, your husband, and Ms. Chen, that the accounts have been frozen pending fraud investigation. However, given your concerns about potential dissipation of assets, we've expedited the process. They should be receiving automated notifications right about now. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. The bank's showing some kind of error with our accounts. Did you authorize any changes? The audacity of his question, asking if I had authorized changes when he had been systematically looting my benefits for months, sparked a cold anger that burned beneath my calculated exterior. No, I texted back. What kind of error? His response came quickly. Something about suspected unauthorized activity. I'm sure it's just a mistake. I'll handle it. I'm sure you will, I thought, but not in the way you're expecting. By the time my attorney, Catherine Delgado, arrived, I had a comprehensive briefing prepared. Catherine was a formidable presence, a former JAG officer who specialized in veteran affairs and financial fraud cases. She listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions as I presented the evidence Maya and I had compiled. "This is one of the more egregious cases of veteran benefit exploitation I've seen," she said finally, setting down the folder containing bank statements and LLC formation documents. "And the use of a power of attorney obtained during a medical crisis adds a particularly troubling dimension." "What are my options?" I asked, the same question I'd asked countless doctors during my physical recovery. Then, as now, I wanted clarity about the path forward, not false reassurance. "You have several," Catherine replied. "The bank has already initiated recovery procedures for the transferred funds. That process will continue regardless of what else you decide to pursue. Beyond that, you could file for divorce citing financial misconduct, which would likely result in a more favorable settlement given the circumstances. You could pursue civil damages for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. Or, given the federal protections on veteran benefits, you could support criminal prosecution." "These aren't mutually exclusive," Maya pointed out. "Correct," Catherine confirmed. "You can pursue multiple avenues simultaneously. The question is what outcome you're seeking." I considered this carefully. What did I want? Justice, certainly. Recovery of what had been taken, absolutely. But beyond that? "I want accountability," I said finally. "I want recognition of what was done and why it was wrong. And I want to ensure he can't do this to anyone else in the future." Catherine nodded. "Then I recommend we pursue all available options. Civil proceedings to recover damages beyond what the bank can automatically retrieve. Criminal referral to prosecute the exploitation of protected benefits. And divorce proceedings to sever financial entanglements and protect your remaining assets." As we discussed next steps, my phone continued buzzing with increasingly urgent messages from Ryan. The bank notification had clearly disrupted his plans, creating a panic I could almost visualize. Good. Let him feel a fraction of the destabilization I had experienced discovering his betrayal. "There's something else you should consider," Catherine said as our meeting was concluding. "Your husband likely doesn't realize the full implications of what he's done. Misappropriation of veteran benefits carries significant penalties, potentially including federal charges. Once he understands this, he may attempt to negotiate or pressure you to withdraw complaints." "I won't be pressured," I said with the certainty of someone who had faced far more intimidating threats than a desperate husband's manipulations. "Nevertheless, be prepared," Catherine advised. "Men like your husband, individuals who commit sophisticated financial fraud against those who trust them, typically respond with either extreme contrition or aggressive counter-accusations when cornered, sometimes both in succession." Her warning proved prescient. Just as she was leaving, Ryan called rather than texted. I let it go to voicemail, then listened with Maya beside me. "Emma, something strange is happening with the accounts." His voice carried forced casualness belied by an undercurrent of tension. "The bank is saying there's some kind of fraud investigation involving your benefits account and our joint business accounts. They've frozen everything pending review. It's obviously a misunderstanding, but I need you to call them and clear this up immediately. Call me back as soon as you get this." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Still trying to manipulate you into fixing his problem." "That's been our dynamic," I acknowledged. "I fix things, forms, paperwork, problems. He's counted on that." "Well, he's got a problem no amount of fixing will solve now," Maya said with grim satisfaction. "The bank doesn't make accusations of federal benefit fraud lightly. Those automated notifications are just the beginning." As if confirming her assessment, my phone buzzed with an email notification. The bank had scheduled a formal meeting with account holders, Ryan, Jennifer, and myself, for tomorrow morning to discuss serious concerns regarding account activities and potential violations of federal banking regulations. The confrontation I had been strategically preparing for had just been scheduled, formalized by an institution with the power to do what I alone could not: force Ryan and Jennifer to face the consequences of their actions with no possibility of evasion or manipulation. "It seems we have a deadline," I said to Maya, a familiar sense of pre-mission focus settling over me. "Let's make sure we're fully prepared for tomorrow's engagement." Ryan called 17 more times over the next 4 hours. I let each call go to voicemail, listening to his messages escalate from casual concern to barely contained panic as the reality of his situation became increasingly clear. The progression was almost clinical in its predictability, exactly as Catherine had warned. "Emma, the bank is making some kind of mistake. Call me." Then, "This is getting serious. They're talking about unauthorized transfers. You need to tell them you approved these investments." And finally, "For God's sake, Emma, answer your phone. They're saying there could be federal charges. This is insane. Whatever you think happened, we need to talk before this gets out of control." Each message confirmed what I already knew. Ryan had never expected consequences. He had calculated risk based on my trust, my tendency to avoid confrontation during my recovery, and my focus on healing rather than finances. He had bet everything on my continued ignorance, and now that bet was catastrophically failing. I spent the afternoon with Maya preparing for the bank meeting. Catherine had arranged for a financial forensics specialist to join us, further strengthening our position. We meticulously documented every unauthorized transfer, connecting each to subsequent investments in the RJ Investments LLC or personal expenditures that clearly benefited Ryan and Jennifer. If you're going through something similar, let me know in the comments. One thing that helped me was connecting with other veterans who'd faced betrayal. The solidarity made an impossible situation survivable. What do you think their strategy will be tomorrow? I asked Maya as we reviewed our documentation one final time. She considered the question with the tactical assessment of someone who had faced both military and financial adversaries. Based on the panic in those voicemails, Ryan is just realizing the potential consequences. He'll come in with a two-pronged approach: minimization and authorization. He'll claim the transfers were smaller than they appear or were for legitimate business purposes. When that fails, he'll insist you verbally authorized everything despite the absence of proper documentation. And Jennifer? She'll either present as an innocent employee following her boss's instructions or as a legitimate business partner who believed everything was above board. Either way, she'll distance herself from responsibility. Maya's assessment aligned with my own. Ryan had always been skilled at context manipulation, reframing situations to shift blame or minimize his role in problems. It was a trait I'd initially interpreted as optimistic problem-solving rather than the warning sign it truly was. As evening approached, Ryan's texts took a different tone. "Emma, please. Whatever you think happened, I can explain. We've been through too much together to let a financial misunderstanding tear us apart. I'm coming home. We need to talk face to face." I had no intention of having that conversation on his terms, in private where he could employ the emotional manipulation he'd perfected over years. Instead, I packed an overnight bag and drove to Maya's apartment across town, sending Ryan a single text. "I'll see you at the bank meeting tomorrow. Bring your attorney." His response was immediate. "Attorney? Emma, this is between us. We don't need lawyers involved in a simple misunderstanding." I didn't respond. There was nothing simple about systematically draining a disabled veteran's benefits account to fund a secret business with his mistress. Framing it as a misunderstanding was gaslighting of the highest order, something I now recognized as Ryan's signature tactic. At Maya's apartment, I finally allowed myself a moment of genuine emotional release. Since discovering the betrayal, I'd operated almost exclusively in tactical mode, the compartmentalized functioning that had served me well in combat situations. But alone with Maya, in the safety of her spare bedroom, the full impact hit me in waves. 12 years, I said, my voice breaking despite my efforts to maintain composure. 12 years, including 4 when I was fighting just to walk again. How could he do this? How could he look at money that represents my sacrifice and see an opportunity for theft? Maya didn't offer platitudes or easy reassurances. As a fellow veteran, she understood that some wounds can't be minimized or brushed aside with positive thinking. Because he's a predator, she said simply. A sophisticated one who wears the mask of a supportive husband, but a predator nonetheless. He saw vulnerability and exploited it, counting on your trust and focus on recovery to provide cover for his actions. I feel like such a fool, I admitted, the confession painful but necessary. All those late nights, the secretive phone calls, the vague explanations about business expansion, I accepted everything at face value. That's not foolishness, Emma. That's what marriage is supposed to be. Trust based on shared commitment. He violated that trust while you were still recovering from injuries sustained serving our country. That makes him the villain in this story, not you. Maya's framing helped, providing perspective that cut through the self-recrimination threatening to overwhelm me. I hadn't failed by trusting my husband. He had failed by betraying that trust in the most calculated manner possible. Tomorrow will be difficult, Maya acknowledged. Seeing them together, hearing their justifications. But remember, you have the full force of federal banking regulations and veteran benefit protections behind you. They have nothing but deception and manipulation. That night, I slept better than I had since discovering the fraud. Perhaps it was the knowledge that the machinery of accountability was now in motion, or simply the relief of being away from the home that had become contaminated by betrayal. Whatever the reason, I woke feeling clear-headed and resolved, ready for the confrontation ahead. We arrived at the bank 20 minutes early, meeting Catherine and her financial specialist in the lobby. The specialist, Dr. Eliza Washington, had prepared a comprehensive analysis of the fraudulent transactions, tracing the movement of funds with forensic precision. The pattern is unambiguous, she explained as we reviewed her findings one final time. Regular transfers from the protected benefits account to the joint business account, then immediate redistribution to the RJ Investments LLC or personal accounts. The timing indicates premeditation rather than emergency business needs. Catherine nodded in agreement. The power of attorney being used specifically to remove dual authorization requirements is particularly damning. That demonstrates knowledge that the transactions would not have been approved under normal circumstances. At precisely 9:00 a.m., Mr. Winters escorted us to the conference room where the meeting would take place. The bank had taken the unusual step of arranging for a federal banking compliance officer to attend via video conference, an indication of how seriously they viewed the potential violations. Ryan and Jennifer arrived 5 minutes later, separately, but within moments of each other. Ryan entered first, faltering visibly when he saw me flanked by Maya, Catherine, and Dr. Washington. He had come alone, no attorney, clearly still believing he could charm or manipulate his way through this misunderstanding. Jennifer followed, looking professional but tense in a conservative navy suit. Unlike Ryan, she had brought legal representation, a sharp-featured man who introduced himself as Gerald Torres from Westbrook & Associates, a firm known for handling white-collar defense cases. The contrast was telling. Jennifer had recognized the severity of the situation and prepared accordingly. Ryan, still operating under the delusion of his own invulnerability, had come unprepared for the formal proceedings that awaited him. Mr. Winters began the meeting with clinical detachment. This meeting has been called to address serious irregularities identified in accounts held by Ryan Barrett, Emma Barrett, and Jennifer Chen, particularly as they relate to the veteran benefits account established for Mrs. Barrett's service-connected disability compensation. The federal compliance officer, introduced as Ms. Patelli, spoke next, her voice crisp through the video conference system. For clarity, I want to establish that veteran benefits are protected under federal law with specific restrictions on how they may be accessed, transferred, or utilized, even by individuals holding power of attorney. These protections exist specifically to prevent exploitation of disabled veterans. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, the implications of her words clearly registering. He attempted to take control of the narrative immediately. "There seems to be a significant misunderstanding," he began, his voice carrying the smooth confidence that had once seemed charming, but now rang hollow. "As Emma's husband and business partner, I've been managing our joint investments, including expansion of our property management company. All transfers were for legitimate business purposes, with Emma's full knowledge and verbal authorization," Catherine interjected before Mr. Winters could respond. "My client categorically denies providing any such authorization. Furthermore, the documentation clearly shows that Mr. Barrett specifically removed the dual authorization requirement that had been established precisely to prevent unilateral withdrawals from Mrs. Barrett's protected benefits account. That change was made for convenience during a period when Emma was dealing with medical issues," Ryan countered smoothly. "She was finding it difficult to go to the bank for signatures during her recovery." "Interesting," Catherine replied. "Because bank records indicate that change was made while Mrs. Barrett was fully mobile and actively working in your joint business. In fact, the records show she made an in-person transaction at this very branch the day before you removed the dual authorization requirement." Ryan's confident expression faltered momentarily. He hadn't expected this level of detailed preparation. Ms. Patelli spoke again from the video screen. "Mr. Barrett, could you explain why funds transferred from Mrs. Barrett's veteran benefits account were consistently moved to an LLC in which Mrs. Barrett has no ownership interest? According to state business records, RJ Investments LLC is registered solely to yourself and Ms. Chen." This direct question about the LLC visibly startled Jennifer, who leaned over to whisper urgently to her attorney. Her reaction suggested Ryan might not have been entirely truthful with her either about the source of their investment funds. "RJ Investments is a subsidiary of our main property management company," Ryan attempted, the explanation sounding hollow even to my ears. "It was established as a separate entity for tax purposes, but the benefits ultimately flow back to our joint business." Dr. Washington opened her laptop, turning the screen toward the group. "That claim is inconsistent with the financial records. There have been no transfers from RJ Investments back to Barrett Property Management. In fact, the flow of funds has been exclusively one-directional, from Mrs. Barrett's protected accounts into RJ Investments, followed by distributions to personal accounts and expenses that appear to be unrelated to legitimate business operations." She displayed a meticulously detailed flowchart tracking every dollar from my benefits account through various transfers and ultimate expenditures. The visual was devastating in its clarity, showing restaurant charges, jewelry purchases, weekend getaways, and luxury items that had never been part of our shared life. Jennifer's attorney intervened at this point. "My client was under the impression that all funds invested in RJ Investments came from legitimate business sources. She had no knowledge that veteran benefits were being improperly utilized. It was the first indication of the strategy Maya had predicted," Jennifer distancing herself from knowledge or responsibility for the source of funds, positioning herself as another victim of Ryan's deception rather than an active participant. Ryan shot Jennifer a look of surprise and betrayal, clearly not expecting her to separate her defense from his. The unified front he had likely anticipated was already crumbling under the weight of evidence and potential consequences. "Mr. Barrett," Mr. Winters continued, "the bank has already filed suspicious activity reports with the appropriate federal agencies regarding these transactions. Given the protected nature of veteran benefits and the apparent deliberate circumvention of established safeguards, these matters may be referred for criminal investigation." The word criminal seemed to finally penetrate Ryan's confidence. His face paled visibly as he realized charm and manipulation wouldn't resolve this situation. "This is absurd," he said, desperation entering his voice. "Emma and I are married. These are joint financial decisions for our mutual benefit." There's nothing criminal about managing our finances. Catherine's response was measured but devastating. Marriage does not grant unlimited access to a disabled veteran's protected benefits. The law is exceptionally clear on this point. Using a power of attorney obtained during a medical crisis to systematically drain federally protected benefits for purposes unrelated to the veteran's welfare constitutes exploitation under both federal banking regulations and criminal statutes. She turned to address me directly, a tactical move that forced everyone else in the room to acknowledge my presence, not just as Ryan's wife, but as the injured party with agency and authority. Mrs. Barrett, can you confirm whether you granted specific authorization for your husband to transfer your veteran benefits into an LLC in which you have no ownership interest? I did not, I stated clearly, meeting Ryan's eyes directly for the first time. I never authorized the removal of dual authorization requirements, never approved transfers to RJ Investments LLC, and had no knowledge of this entity's existence until this week. Ryan attempted to interrupt, but Catherine continued, smoothly, "Can you further confirm whether you authorized the use of your veteran benefits for expenses such as weekend getaways, jewelry purchases, or dining experiences that you did not participate in?" "I did not," I repeated, maintaining direct eye contact with Ryan as his deception was methodically dismantled. Many of these expenses appear to be for events and items I have never seen or experienced. Jennifer shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her attorney placing a restraining hand on her arm as though sensing she might speak impulsively. The federal compliance officer's voice cut through the tension. "Based on the documentation provided and statements made today, I am officially classifying these transactions as suspicious under federal banking regulations. The freeze on all associated accounts will remain in place pending full investigation, and this matter will be referred to the Department of Justice's Veteran Affairs Division for review of potential criminal violations." Ryan's composure finally shattered completely. "This is insane. Emma, you can't seriously be doing this. After everything we've been through, everything I did for you during your recovery, you're going to let them treat me like a criminal over what amounts to a paperwork issue?" The audacity of his statement, framing years of systematic theft as a paperwork issue and attempting to weaponize his basic marital support during my recovery, ignited a cold fury I had contained throughout the meeting. "What you did for me?" I repeated, my voice quiet but carrying the steel forged through military service and personal betrayal. "You mean the bare minimum expected of a spouse while I recovered from injuries sustained serving our country? Should I be grateful that you didn't abandon me after I nearly died protecting the freedoms you've enjoyed your entire life?" The room fell silent as I continued, addressing not just Ryan, but everyone present. "Those benefits represent blood and sacrifice, mine and my units. 2 members of my team didn't come home at all. The money you so casually stole was meant to provide security after I gave parts of myself, physically and mentally, for this country. It wasn't an investment opportunity or your personal slush fund." I turned to face Jennifer directly. "And you. You entered our business, our home, accepted my friendship and trust while helping dismantle the financial security my service earned. Whether you knew the source of the funds or not, you participated in a relationship and business built on stolen valor as surely as if you'd worn medals you didn't earn." Having said my piece, I nodded to Catherine, ceding the floor back to the professional proceedings. The meeting continued with technical discussions of account disposition, potential recovery procedures, and next steps in the investigation. Throughout the remainder of the conversation, Ryan attempted several times to catch my eye, his expression cycling between anger, pleading, and calculation. I deliberately avoided further direct engagement, maintaining the emotional distance necessary to complete this difficult but essential confrontation. As the meeting concluded, Mr. Winters confirmed that all transfers from my benefits account had been frozen and would be reversed to the extent possible. Funds already invested in properties or spent would require separate legal proceedings to recover, but the immediate bleeding had been stopped. Outside the bank, Ryan attempted one final approach, stepping into my path as I walked toward Maya's car. "Emma, please. This has gotten completely out of control. We can still fix this if you just tell them you approved these investments. 12 years of marriage has to count for something." I looked at him. Really looked at the man I had pledged my life to, seeing him clearly perhaps for the first time. The practiced sincerity in his expression, the calculated body language, the implicit threat beneath his appeal to marital loyalty. Had he always been this transparent? Or had betrayal simply granted me new vision? "It counted for something," I replied calmly. "It counted enough that I trusted you with my recovery, my finances, and my future. You're the one who decided those 12 years were worth sacrificing for whatever you've built with Jennifer. Don't put that decision on me." I stepped around him and continued walking, his protests fading behind me as I moved forward, literally and figuratively, into a future I hadn't planned but now faced with the same resilience that had carried me through combat zones and recovery wards. "You did well in there," Maya said as we drove away from the bank. "Better than well. You were magnificent." The praise from someone who had seen me at my strongest and most vulnerable meant more than Maya could know. "It doesn't feel like a victory," I admitted. "It feels like surviving an ambush." "That's exactly what it was," she agreed. "An ambush planned over months by someone who knew your movements, your vulnerabilities, your trust. Surviving that isn't just a victory. It's a testament to your strength." As we drove back to her apartment, I felt a strange lightness beginning to replace the heaviness that had settled in my chest since discovering Ryan's betrayal. Not happiness. That would take much longer to rediscover, but the unmistakable sense of having passed through the worst of a storm into the first tentative moments of clarity beyond. The days following the bank meeting unfolded with the tactical precision of a well-planned military operation. Catherine's office filed emergency motions to freeze all assets connected to RJ Investments, ensuring that properties purchased with my stolen benefits couldn't be liquidated or transferred, while legal proceedings continued. The bank completed its formal investigation, resulting in a detailed report that would prove devastating to Ryan and Jennifer in both civil and criminal contexts. Most significantly, Ms. Patelli from Federal Banking Compliance had escalated the case to the Department of Justice's Veteran Affairs Division, where it had been assigned to a prosecutor specializing in financial crimes against disabled veterans. The potential consequences had shifted from theoretical to tangible. Ryan and Jennifer now faced not just civil liability, but possible federal charges carrying substantial penalties. Throughout this flurry of legal activity, I maintained strategic distance from Ryan, communicating exclusively through Catherine. He alternated between desperate appeals for reconciliation and thinly veiled threats about what a prolonged legal battle would cost us both, emotionally and financially. Each message revealed more about the man he truly was, the manipulative tactician hidden beneath the supportive husband I thought I'd married. While Catherine handled the legal front, Maya helped me with the practical aspects of disentanglement. We secured a temporary restraining order barring Ryan from our home, allowing me to return and collect important documents, irreplaceable mementos, and essential personal items. The house itself would remain untouched pending court determinations about property division, but I had no intention of living there again. The space felt contaminated by deception, each room holding memories now questioned through the lens of betrayal. If you've experienced financial betrayal, drop a heart in the comments. The support from this community has been incredible, and your engagement helps others find this information when they need it most. Instead, I found a small but comfortable apartment near the VA Medical Center, where I received ongoing physical therapy. The space was nothing like the showcase home Ryan and I had purchased, no soaring ceilings or designer finishes. But it offered something far more valuable: security and peace. For the first time in months, perhaps years, I slept without the subconscious vigilance that comes from sharing space with someone who means you harm. A week after the bank meeting, Catherine called with news that shifted the trajectory of the case dramatically. The prosecutor has obtained warrant for access to all RJ Investments' electronic records, she explained. They've already conducted a preliminary review of the company email accounts. And? I prompted, sensing there was more. They found extensive communication between Ryan and Jennifer dating back nearly 14 months, well before she was hired at your company. It appears they met through an industry networking event and began planning this venture shortly thereafter. The timeline landed like a physical blow. 14 months placed their initial connection during my most challenging period of recovery, when infection complications had necessitated additional surgeries and intensive rehabilitation. While I had been fighting to walk again, Ryan had been laying groundwork for betrayal. There's more, Catherine continued, her voice gentle but direct. The emails discuss Jennifer's hiring at Barrett Property Management as a strategic move to position for the transition. Ryan specifically mentions access to your benefits account as a potential funding source, noting the substantial back pay settlement you'd recently received. The calculated nature of their scheme, targeting not just any funds but specifically my service-connected benefits during a period of medical vulnerability, transformed my understanding of what had happened. This wasn't opportunistic misconduct or a relationship that had developed inappropriately from a professional connection. This was predatory fraud from inception, with my benefits as the explicitly identified target. The prosecutor believes these communications substantially strengthen the criminal case, Catherine concluded. They demonstrate clear intent to defraud a disabled veteran, which carries enhanced penalties under federal statutes. I absorbed this information with the disciplined compartmentalization I'd developed through military service. What does this mean practically for the civil proceedings? It transforms our negotiating position entirely. Ryan's attorney reached out this morning suggesting mediation to resolve the divorce and financial matters quickly and quietly. With this new evidence, we can dictate terms rather than negotiate them. The revelation brought unexpected clarity. Throughout the unfolding legal process, I had struggled with lingering doubts, moments of weakness when I questioned whether I was overreacting, whether there might be some explanation that could partially justify Ryan's actions. The emails Catherine described eliminated those doubts completely. The man I had married had seen my combat-related disability not as something to support me through, but as a vulnerability to exploit for financial gain. "What do you recommend?" I asked. Catherine, trusting her professional judgment in this unfamiliar terrain, "We proceed on all fronts simultaneously. The criminal investigation will continue regardless of civil resolutions. Financial crimes against disabled veterans are prosecuted independently of victim preferences once certain thresholds are met. For the divorce and civil recovery, we should agree to mediation, but from a position of maximum leverage." The strategy made sense, aligning with the approach I would have taken in any tactical situation. Maintain pressure from multiple directions while progressing toward clearly defined objectives. The following day brought another unexpected development. Jennifer's attorney contacted Catherine requesting a private meeting with me, independent of Ryan or the ongoing legal proceedings. Catherine advised caution but didn't dismiss the request outright. "It's unusual," she acknowledged, "but it could provide valuable intelligence about their internal dynamics or potential defenses. If you're comfortable proceeding, we'll arrange strict parameters. My presence throughout, no recordings, and no discussion of settlement terms without prior authorization." My tactical instincts favored gathering information whenever possible. "Schedule it," I decided, "but make it clear this doesn't pause any ongoing proceedings." The meeting was arranged for the following afternoon at Catherine's office. neutral territory that maintained professional boundaries while providing the security of familiar surroundings. Jennifer arrived precisely on time, accompanied by her attorney, but noticeably subdued compared to her appearance at the bank meeting. The confident professional demeanor had been replaced by something more hesitant, almost apologetic. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she began after preliminary introductions. "I know you have no reason to listen to anything I have to say, but there are things you should know that won't necessarily come out in the legal proceedings," Catherine interjected smoothly. "Before you continue, I want to clarify that anything said in this meeting could potentially be used in future legal proceedings. My client has not agreed to any confidentiality restrictions." Jennifer nodded, exchanging glances with her attorney, who remained silent but watchful. "I understand. I'm not here to negotiate or make excuses. I'm here because I've realized the full extent of what Ryan did to both of us." She placed a USB drive on the table between us. "This contains additional correspondence between Ryan and me that wasn't on the company servers. Personal emails and messages that show how he manipulated information from the beginning." Her attorney finally spoke. "My client has provided this information to the prosecutor as part of a cooperation agreement. She's accepting responsibility for her role while clarifying the nature of Mr. Barrett's misrepresentations to her." The implication was clear. Jennifer was positioning herself as another victim of Ryan's manipulation, rather than an equal partner in fraud. It was a predictable legal strategy, but the flash drive suggested there might be substance behind it. "What specifically do you think I should know?" I asked, maintaining emotional distance despite the surreal circumstance of facing my husband's mistress across a conference table. Jennifer met my eyes directly for the first time. "Ryan told me you were divorcing when we met. He said you'd grown apart during your recovery, that you were staying together temporarily for financial reasons while he helped you transition to independence." The audacity of the lie was almost impressive in its calculated cruelty, using my recovery as the backdrop for a fabricated marital breakdown. "He claimed the property management company was failing," Jennifer continued, "that you'd lost interest after your injury and weren't contributing meaningfully anymore. RJ Investments was presented as his fresh start after years of carrying a business partner who wasn't pulling her weight." Each revelation added another dimension to Ryan's betrayal. He hadn't simply stolen from me financially. He had systematically dismantled my reputation and contributions in fabricated narratives designed to justify his actions to Jennifer and presumably others. "When did you discover these were lies?" Catherine asked, her tone professional but skeptical. "Pieces didn't add up from the beginning," Jennifer admitted. "But Ryan always had explanations. The separate business entity was for liability protection. The secrecy was to avoid hurting you during a difficult transition. The veteran benefits account." She paused, visible discomfort crossing her features. "He said those transfers were your idea, that you were divesting assets before filing for divorce, and had authorized everything. And you believed that?" I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. That I would drain my own protected benefits account as some kind of pre-divorce strategy? Jennifer's expression reflected genuine regret, though whether for her actions or merely their consequences remained unclear. I believed what I wanted to believe. Ryan presented a compelling narrative where he was the supportive husband helping his disabled wife transition to independence while protecting his own financial future. It wasn't until the bank meeting when I saw your face, saw your genuine shock and betrayal, that I fully accepted how comprehensively he had lied. Her attorney added context to the narrative. My client began documenting inconsistencies several months ago when Mr. Barrett's explanations about funding sources became increasingly implausible. She was preparing to exit the business relationship when the fraud investigation brought everything to light. The tactical part of my mind recognized this as careful positioning for potential criminal proceedings, establishing Jennifer as a deceived participant who took steps toward rectification when she suspected wrongdoing. Whether this accurately reflected her actions or was a constructed defense narrative was impossible to determine without the evidence she'd provided. "Why tell me this now?" I asked. "Why not save it exclusively for the prosecutor?" "Because you deserve to know," Jennifer replied, surprising me with what appeared to be genuine emotion. "Not just the facts of what happened, but why. Ryan didn't just steal your money. He stole your story. He rewrote your marriage, your recovery, your contributions to the business. He made you someone else entirely when he described you to me and others." There was something in her words that resonated unexpectedly, the recognition that financial theft, while quantifiable and prosecutable, represented only one dimension of the harm inflicted. The appropriation of my narrative, the reinvention of my identity to serve Ryan's purposes, these were violations that wouldn't appear in bank statements or legal filings but cut just as deeply. "The flash drive contains everything," Jennifer continued. "Communications where he discussed your benefits specifically as a target. Messages where he coached me on maintaining the deception if we encountered you at industry events. Plans for the business that explicitly excluded you while using your resources to build it." Her attorney added the legal context. "My client has accepted responsibility for her role in the financial misconduct. She will make restitution as determined by the court and has provided substantial cooperation that will likely lead to more serious charges against Mr. Barrett as the primary architect of the scheme." I studied Jennifer carefully, trying to assess the authenticity of her apparent remorse. The military had taught me to evaluate not just what people said, but the micro-expressions and body language that often revealed more than words. What I saw was complex, genuine regret overlaid with self-preservation, sincere apology coexisting with tactical legal positioning. "Thank you for the information," I said finally, neither accepting her implied apology nor rejecting the potential value of her evidence. "Catherine will review what you've provided and determine its relevance to our proceedings." After Jennifer and her attorney departed, Catherine examined the flash drive contents with methodical precision, organizing the messages chronologically and by relevance to different aspects of our case. "This is significant," she concluded after nearly an hour of review. "The level of premeditation documented here substantially strengthens both the criminal prosecution and our civil claims. Ryan explicitly identified your benefits as a target because of their substantial value and your focus on physical recovery rather than financial oversight. The calculated predation revealed in those messages eliminated any lingering ambivalence about pursuing maximum consequences. This hadn't been a misunderstanding, a temporary lapse in judgment, or even an affair that spiraled into financial misconduct. It had been a deliberate campaign to exploit a wounded veteran's benefits, while she focused on recovering from injuries sustained serving her country. "Send everything to the prosecutor," I instructed Catherine, "and proceed with the civil case at maximum capacity. No settlements, no mediation, no consideration for his reputation or future. He deserves the full weight of both legal systems." Catherine nodded, understanding the shift in my approach. Until this moment, I had maintained some restraint in our legal strategy, uncertain whether scorched earth tactics might ultimately cause more harm than healing. That reservation had dissolved completely in the face of evidence that Ryan had targeted me specifically because of vulnerabilities created by my service and subsequent injuries. 2 days later, Ryan was arrested on federal charges of veteran benefit exploitation, wire fraud, and financial elder-dependent adult abuse, the last carrying enhanced penalties given my disabled veteran status. The formal indictment included charges that could potentially result in substantial fines and incarceration if convicted on all counts. The news outlets picked up the story immediately, focusing on the exploitation of a disabled combat veteran's benefits by her husband and his business partner. The coverage was uniformly sympathetic to my position, portraying Ryan and Jennifer as predators who had targeted protected veteran resources during a period of medical vulnerability. Ryan's attorney reached out to Catherine within hours of the arrest, suddenly eager to resolve the civil matters amicably and expeditiously. The leverage had shifted completely. With federal charges filed and damning evidence in prosecutors' hands, his focus had pivoted from fighting allegations to damage control. "He's offering complete financial capitulation," Catherine reported, after the call. "Full restoration of all misappropriated funds plus punitive damages, immediate divorce with no claims against any of your assets, and a binding non-disclosure agreement preventing him from discussing you or your marriage publicly." "What's your assessment?" I asked, having come to value Catherine's strategic thinking as much as her legal expertise. "It's a panic response," she replied candidly. "The criminal charges can't be resolved through civil settlement, and the evidence is overwhelming. He's trying to limit damage in the one arena where negotiation remains possible." I considered the offer, weighing it against my objectives. Financial recovery was important, but secondary to accountability. The criminal proceedings would continue regardless, potentially resulting in consequences far more significant than monetary damages. "Accept the financial terms but reject the non-disclosure provision," I decided. "I won't be silenced about what happened, and I won't protect his reputation at the expense of truth." Catherine nodded approvingly. "I'll draft the counterproposal immediately. With his current legal exposure, I expect quick acceptance of those terms." As she prepared to leave, Catherine paused. "You should know that your case has already prompted the VA to review their benefit protection protocols." The prosecutor mentioned that they're considering implementing additional safeguards specifically addressing power of attorney limitations for veteran benefits. This unexpected systemic impact provided the first genuine comfort I'd felt since discovering Ryan's betrayal. If my experience could help protect other veterans from similar exploitation, perhaps some meaningful purpose could be extracted from this painful chapter. That evening, alone in my new apartment, I allowed myself to fully process the events of recent weeks without the tactical focus that had carried me through immediate crisis. The magnitude of betrayal remained staggering. Not just the financial theft, but the deliberate targeting, the calculated deception, the exploitation of trust during my most vulnerable period. Yet alongside this pain came the first tentative recognition of my own resilience. I had discovered the fraud, assembled evidence, engaged appropriate authorities, and pursued accountability through multiple systems simultaneously, all while managing the emotional devastation of personal betrayal. The skills that had carried me through combat zones and medical recovery had proven equally valuable in this unexpected battlefield. As rain tapped gently against my windows, I began making notes for a veteran support group I'd been invited to address the following month. Not about the specifics of my case, which remained in legal proceedings, but about financial self-protection for disabled veterans, recognizing warning signs, implementing safeguards, and maintaining appropriate oversight even during medical recovery. This wasn't the future I had planned or the life I had expected. The partner I had trusted had proven unworthy of that trust in the most profound way possible. Yet as I outlined resources and protective strategies for other veterans, I recognized that this painful experience might ultimately serve a purpose beyond my individual circumstances, becoming a catalyst for change that could protect others facing similar vulnerabilities. 3 months after Ryan's arrest, I sat in the federal courthouse waiting for his plea hearing to begin. The prosecution had built an airtight case, bolstered by Jennifer's cooperation and the mountain of electronic evidence documenting the systematic exploitation of my benefits. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the possibility of substantial prison time, Ryan had agreed to plead guilty to reduce charges, still serious federal offenses carrying significant penalties, but offering the possibility of eventual rehabilitation rather than decades behind bars. Catherine sat beside me, reviewing documents for our now settled civil case. The financial resolution had exceeded even her most optimistic projections. Beyond full restoration of all misappropriated funds, substantial punitive damages had been awarded, and the court had granted me complete ownership of all properties purchased through RJ Investments on the grounds they had been acquired with stolen veteran benefits. The divorce had been finalized with record speed given the extraordinary circumstances, legally severing my connection to the man who had weaponized our marriage vows to facilitate fraud. "Are you sure you want to be here for this?" Catherine asked quietly, her concern evident. "The prosecutor can update us afterward. You don't have to watch this." For many in my position, the plea hearing would represent unnecessary emotional exposure, forcing me to occupy the same space as someone who had caused profound harm during a moment of public reckoning. But military service had taught me the importance of witnessing consequences directly, of maintaining presence even in difficult moments. "I need to see it," I replied simply. "Not for closure. I don't think that exists for something like this. But for confirmation. I need to hear him admit what he did in his own words, under oath, without manipulation or deception." Catherine nodded, understanding this wasn't about vengeance but verification. The need to have reality officially confirmed after months of gaslighting and manipulation. As a combat veteran, I had learned that facing difficult truths directly, however painful, was ultimately less damaging than allowing uncertainty to persist. Across the courtroom, Ryan sat with his defense attorney, diminished in ways that transcended his rumpled suit and uncharacteristic stubble. The confident, charming man who had once commanded every room he entered now appeared hollow, his practiced charisma extinguished by the weight of irrefutable evidence and impending consequences. When his gaze briefly met mine, I saw something I'd never witnessed in 12 years of marriage: unfiltered truth in his eyes, the recognition that no manipulation or clever explanation could alter the reality we both now inhabited. The hearing proceeded with formal efficiency. Charges were read, rights explained, consequences outlined. When asked for his plea, Ryan's voice wavered slightly but remained audible throughout the courtroom. "Guilty, Your Honor." 3 syllables that officially transformed him from accused to convicted, from husband to felon, from trusted partner to documented predator. As required for a guilty plea, Ryan had to provide a factual basis admission, a public acknowledgement of exactly what he had done. The judge insisted on specificity, rejecting his initial vague statements about financial improprieties and demanding explicit acknowledgement of each element of his crimes. "Did you knowingly and intentionally access Mrs. Barrett's veteran benefit account through improper use of a power of attorney obtained during her medical treatment?" the judge asked directly. "Yes, Your Honor." Ryan's voice had lost its characteristic warmth, becoming mechanical as he responded to each question. "Did you deliberately remove the dual authorization requirement specifically to facilitate unauthorized transfers from her protected benefits account?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Did you transfer these funds, which you knew to be federally protected veteran benefits, into accounts and investments from which Mrs. Barrett was deliberately excluded?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Did you conduct these activities while Mrs. Barrett was recovering from service-connected injuries, using her focus on medical rehabilitation to conceal your financial activities?" Each admission built upon the previous one, constructing an undeniable record of calculated exploitation. This wasn't a momentary lapse or a misunderstanding about account authorities. It was systematic predation targeting a disabled veteran during a period of medical vulnerability, a fact now permanently established in federal court records. If you're just joining my story, please subscribe. Next week, I'll share the resources that helped me rebuild my financial security after everything fell apart. When the hearing concluded, Ryan was taken into custody to await sentencing. The prosecution had recommended incarceration, followed by supervised release, substantial restitution, separate from our civil settlement, and permanent restrictions on financial activities involving protected classes of individuals. The judge would make the final determination at the sentencing hearing scheduled for the following month, but given the nature of the offenses and Ryan's full admission, leniency seemed unlikely. Outside the courthouse, journalists waited with cameras and Microphones. The exploitation of a disabled veteran's benefits having attracted significant media attention. Catherine had prepared a brief statement, which I delivered with the composure developed through years of military briefings. Today's guilty plea confirms what the evidence has clearly shown, that my service-connected benefits were deliberately targeted and exploited during my recovery from combat injuries. While no court proceeding can undo that betrayal, the acknowledgement of these crimes under oath represents an important step toward accountability. I continued with the message I had carefully crafted, shifting focus from my personal situation to the broader implications. This case has highlighted vulnerabilities in how veteran benefits are protected, particularly when powers of attorney are involved. I'm working with veteran advocacy organizations to strengthen these protections and develop educational resources to help other disabled veterans secure their benefits against similar exploitation. This redirection toward systemic improvement, rather than personal vindication, felt authentic to my military experience. The recognition that individual hardships could and should inform broader protections for the community. The reporters seemed surprised by this approach, having anticipated either emotional condemnation or expressions of personal relief. Instead, they encountered a focused veteran applying tactical thinking to transform personal betrayal into collective security. As Catherine drove me home, I felt an unexpected lightness. Not happiness exactly, but the unburdening that comes with having predictions confirmed rather than fears sustained. The man I had married had indeed done exactly what the evidence suggested. There were no mitigating circumstances, no explanations that might partially absolve his actions. The stark truth had been entered into official record, witnessed by the court and acknowledged by Ryan himself. "What will you do now?" Catherine asked as we navigated away from downtown. Her question wasn't about legal proceedings, which had largely concluded, but about the broader reconstruction of a life fundamentally altered by betrayal. I considered carefully before answering. The military had taught me the importance of strategic planning after significant disruptions, assessing available resources, identifying clear objectives, and developing actionable paths forward. 3 things, I replied with the clarity that came from months of reflection. First, financial reconstruction. Not just recovering what was taken, but establishing new systems with better protections. Second, professional redirection. The property management company carries too many negative associations now, but my skills transfer to other areas. And third, community contribution. Developing resources for other veterans based on what I've learned through this experience. Catherine nodded approvingly. "That's remarkably well considered given everything you've been through. Most people in your position would still be processing the emotional aftermath." "I am processing it," I acknowledged. "But the military teaches you to function effectively while carrying difficult emotional burdens. Forward movement and emotional processing happen simultaneously, not sequentially. This parallel processing had been essential during my physical recovery and proved equally valuable in navigating the aftermath of betrayal. I could acknowledge the profound pain of Ryan's actions while simultaneously constructing a path forward, the 2 efforts complementary rather than mutually exclusive. The following weeks brought rapid implementation of my 3-part strategy. The financial reconstruction began with completely new accounts at a different institution, established with explicit protections specifically designed for veteran benefits. The substantial civil settlement provided resources to create long-term security, structured with input from financial advisors specializing in disabled veteran planning. Professional redirection took shape through conversations with the veteran business alliance, where my experience in property management coupled with my military leadership background opened unexpected opportunities. A veteran-focused housing nonprofit needed someone to develop their residential program for disabled veterans transitioning from military to civilian housing, a role that leveraged my property expertise while serving the veteran community I deeply understood. The community contribution aspect evolved most organically, beginning with an invitation to speak at a VA financial wellness workshop about my experience. What I had initially envisioned as a cautionary tale transformed into something more constructive, a systematic approach to benefit protection incorporating legal safeguards, technological monitoring tools, and early warning recognition. The VU response had been immediate and substantive, leading to collaboration with veteran service organizations to develop comprehensive protection protocols. 6 months after the bank first alerted me to unauthorized transfers, I stood at the podium of the National Disabled Veterans Conference, addressing hundreds of veterans and service providers about financial security. The journey from fraud victim to subject matter expert had been neither planned nor anticipated, but reflected the military principle of adapting mission parameters based on ground realities. Financial exploitation targeting disabled veterans isn't rare, I explained to the attentive audience. It's significantly underreported, particularly when perpetrated by family members or caregivers. The same trust that facilitates necessary support during recovery can create vulnerabilities if misplaced. I outlined the protective measures we had developed, practical tools rather than abstract warnings, specific procedures rather than general cautions. The approach resonated with the veteran audience, who recognized the tactical thinking underlying the recommendations. The power of attorney that enabled my exploitation was granted during a medical crisis, a time when clear thinking about financial protections was understandably not my priority, I continued. Our new protocols include pre-established limitation documents that can be prepared before medical procedures, establishing specific restrictions that remain in effect regardless of general power of attorney provisions. The presentation concluded with announcement of a new initiative, a partnership between veteran service organizations, financial institutions, and legal aid providers to create a rapid response system for suspected benefit exploitation. The program would provide immediate account monitoring, legal intervention when necessary, and recovery assistance, all adapted to the specific needs and circumstances of disabled veterans. As I fielded questions afterward, a VA benefits coordinator approached with unexpected news. The department is reviewing its power of attorney procedures based directly on your case, she informed me. They're developing new restriction options specifically designed to protect benefits while still allowing necessary medical advocacy. This systemic impact represented something I hadn't dared hope for. The transformation of my personal trauma into institutional safeguards that would protect countless veterans facing similar vulnerabilities. The military concept of mission success extending beyond individual circumstances found new meaning in this context. Later that evening, I received a call from Maya, who had remained a steadfast presence throughout the legal proceedings and recovery process. "I just saw your presentation online," she said. "The VA streamed it on their financial protection channel. Emma, do you realize what you've accomplished in just 6 months?" The question gave me pause. I had been so focused on tactical execution, addressing immediate needs, developing specific protections, establishing new systems, that I hadn't fully registered the strategic transformation that had occurred. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Some days I still feel like I'm responding to a crisis rather than building something new." "That's because you're still measuring from the point of betrayal," Maya observed with the directness of a fellow veteran. "But everyone else is measuring from what existed before you got involved." There were virtually no specialized protections for disabled veteran benefits before your case highlighted the vulnerabilities. Now, there's a comprehensive approach being implemented nationwide. Her perspective shifted my own, allowing me to see the situation through an operational rather than personal lens. The metrics of success weren't how completely I had recovered from betrayal, but how effectively those painful experiences had been transformed into protections for others. This reframing didn't diminish the personal impact of Ryan's actions. The betrayal remained profound, the violation of trust still fundamentally altering how I viewed relationships and financial interdependence. But alongside that reality existed another equally valid truth. The exploitation that had targeted my vulnerability had inadvertently created protection for countless others. In similar situations, this dual reality, personal wound and public benefit coexisting in the same experience, felt uniquely aligned with military service itself, where individual sacrifice often translated to collective security in ways not fully visible to those making the sacrifice. 2 weeks later, I attended Ryan's sentencing hearing, again choosing to witness directly rather than receive secondhand reports. The judge's comments before announcing the sentence proved unexpectedly validating. The defendant's actions represent a particularly egregious form of exploitation, she stated for the record. Targeting protected veteran benefits during a period of medical recovery demonstrates a calculated predation that merits significant consequences. These benefits represent not merely financial assets, but tangible recognition of extraordinary service and sacrifice for our nation. Their misappropriation constitutes not just theft, but a fundamental disrespect for that service. The sentence reflected this perspective. 30 months incarceration, followed by 5 years of supervised release, substantial restitution requirements, and permanent restrictions on financial activities involving protected individuals or accounts. It was neither the maximum possible penalty nor a symbolic slap on the wrist. It was proportionate accountability for calculated exploitation of a disabled veteran. As Ryan was led from the courtroom, he attempted one final moment of eye contact, perhaps seeking some signal of forgiveness or acknowledgement. I met his gaze briefly, but offered neither, recognizing that true accountability required facing consequences without the comfort of absolution or the relief of reconciliation. Outside the courthouse, I declined further media interviews, having shifted focus entirely to forward-looking initiatives rather than revisiting the details of betrayal. The sentencing represented the final chapter of that particular narrative, not the continuing focus of my attention or energy. That evening, I met with the leadership team we had assembled for the Veteran Financial Protection Initiative. The diverse group included financial security experts, legal advocates, VA representatives, and fellow veterans with relevant experience. Together, we were developing a comprehensive approach to benefit protection that addressed vulnerabilities at multiple levels, from individual account safeguards to institutional policies and legal frameworks. The department has approved funding for the pilot program, announced the VA representative. They're ready to implement the protection protocols you developed at 5 regional centers starting next month. The military concept of force multiplication, where strategic application of resources creates impact disproportionate to the resources invested, found new meaning in this context. The painful experience of one veteran would provide protection for thousands, the lessons extracted from betrayal, transformed into systems of security. As we reviewed implementation timelines and outreach strategies, I recognized that this initiative now defined my relationship to Ryan's actions more than our former marriage or his criminal conviction. The exploitation he had perpetrated had been transformed from an endpoint into a starting point, the beginning of a mission rather than the conclusion of a relationship. The veteran seated beside me, a former Army Ranger who had lost both legs in Afghanistan, summarized this transformation with military succinctness. Standard operating procedure, he noted as we reviewed the protection protocols. Take the hit, assess the vulnerability, develop countermeasures, implement widely. You've turned an ambush into a security briefing. His framing resonated deeply with my military experience, where lessons learned through difficult circumstances became tactical improvements that protected others facing similar situations. The exploitation of my benefits had revealed systemic vulnerabilities, but those same vulnerabilities, once identified, created the opportunity for strengthened protections. As the meeting concluded, I stepped outside into the cool evening air, looking toward the illuminated state capitol building visible in the distance. The path from wounded veteran to financial exploitation victim to protection advocate had been neither planned nor anticipated, but reflected the adaptive resilience that military service had instilled long before Ryan entered my life. The betrayal remained a painful reality I carried. The knowledge that someone I had trusted completely had seen my combat-related disability, not as something to honor, but something to exploit. That understanding would forever alter how I approached trust and vulnerability. Yet, alongside that painful recognition existed the equally powerful awareness that the very exploitation meant to diminish me had instead become the catalyst for meaningful protection of others. In military terms, Ryan had initiated an attack on a single target, but inadvertently revealed a strategic vulnerability that, once identified, could be systematically addressed across the entire theater of operations. His actions, intended solely for personal gain, had ultimately strengthened the very community he had sought to exploit, a consequence he had neither intended nor anticipated when targeting a disabled veteran's benefits. As I stand here today, 2 years after discovering Ryan's betrayal, my life bears little resemblance to the one I once shared with him. The Veteran Financial Protection Program has expanded to all 50 states, with specialized training now mandatory for VA benefits counselors nationwide. The property I once called home has been sold, with proceeds funding scholarships for the children of disabled veterans, transforming what was built on deception into a foundation for others' futures. Most meaningful to me, the support hotline we established has already identified and prevented over 300 cases of potential benefit exploitation, each representing a veteran whose sacrifice remains protected rather than exploited. When I receive the quarterly reports documenting these interventions, I find a sense of purpose that transcends personal vindication. Ryan continues serving his sentence. Jennifer completed her reduced term and now works providing administrative support for veteran services as part of her community restitution. The system that failed to protect me initially now serves as a model for other vulnerable populations, a testament to what can emerge when painful experiences fuel determined advocacy. My journey from decorated soldier to fraud victim to protection advocate wasn't one I could have anticipated or chosen. Yet it reflects the fundamental resilience that defines military service itself, the capacity to transform battlefield vulnerabilities into strategic improvements that benefit those who follow. If you're watching this and struggling with betrayal, financial, or otherwise, please know that your story doesn't end at the point of deception. The same strength that carried you through difficult circumstances can transform devastating experiences into meaningful change, not just for yourself, but for others who face similar vulnerabilities. Thank you for following my journey. If you found value in my story, please subscribe to this channel for more content aimed at protecting veterans and building resilience through life's unexpected battles. Remember, sometimes our greatest contributions emerge not from our victories, but from how we respond when targeted at our most vulnerable.